A billionaire tech CEO dismisses a 9-year-old homeless girl in his corporate elevator, treating her like she's invisible. When he reaches his penthouse office expecting an international crisis management expert who never shows up, the same little girl appears at his door, claiming she can solve his company's billion-dollar international scandal with just one phone call. Mocking her audacity, he sarcastically promises her the expert's $2 million fee if she succeeds. In exactly 47 seconds, she makes the call and saves his empire from collapse. Stunned by her genius, he's determined to transform her life with the promised fortune, but when he investigates her background, he discovers a devastating truth. She's the daughter he abandoned 9 years ago when he chose wealth over family. Now he must face his past mistakes while fighting to earn forgiveness from the brilliant child he never knew he had. If this story touches your heart, please hit that like button and share your thoughts in the comments below. Your support means the world to us. The elevator hummed to the 42nd floor, and Marcus Wellington checked his Rolex for the 3rd time. The international crisis expert should have been here an hour ago. His company's stock had dropped 12% since the scandal broke in Tokyo, and every minute was costing millions. He barely registered the small figure in the elevator corner. Street children had been getting past security lately, probably looking for cafeteria food. He'd speak with building management about tightening access. The last thing Wellington Tech needed was more negative publicity. Emma Chen pressed deeper into the corner, her oversized jacket hanging loose. She'd lived in the building's basement garage for 3 weeks since the shelter reached capacity. Security had grown used to her small form, darting between shadows. She'd learned the CEO's schedule by heart, elevator to the 42nd floor every morning at exactly 8:15. The elevator dinged at the penthouse level. Marcus stepped out without a backward glance, Italian leather shoes clicking against marble toward his corner office. Emma remained frozen, watching the doors slide shut. She'd been riding up and down for hours, trying to work up courage to speak to him. In his office, Assistant Rebecca was fielding calls from panicked board members. "Sir, Tokyo is deteriorating rapidly," she said, not looking up from 3 ringing phones. Dr. Harrison just cancelled. His flight was delayed indefinitely. Marcus felt his jaw tighten. Wellington Tech's Tokyo subsidiary faced massive scandal involving alleged data breaches that could trigger international lawsuits worth billions. 20 years of reputation building crumbled in real time. "Get me another expert. I don't care what it costs. I've tried 17 firms. Everyone's either unavailable or wants at least a week. We don't have a week." Through floor-to-ceiling windows, Marcus saw bustling Seattle streets 42 floors below. Somewhere down there, his empire was falling apart, and he felt powerless. The man who built an empire solving problems couldn't solve his own. Rebecca's intercom buzzed. "Sir, there's a little girl asking to speak with you. Security's trying to escort her out, but she says it's about Tokyo. She specifically mentioned Yamamoto Group and the data breach. She knew details not released publicly." For the first time all morning, Marcus looked up. How could a child know confidential corporate information? The elevator encounter flashed through his mind, the small figure so quiet he'd almost forgotten her presence. "Send her in," he heard himself saying. "But keep security close." Emma stepped into the vast office, worn sneakers silent on Persian rug that cost more than most annual salaries. She'd prepared for weeks, studying everything about Wellington Tech's operations. The homeless shelter had computers for 1-hour evenings, and she'd memorized every detail about the company's structure, vulnerabilities, and current crisis. Marcus studied the child, maybe 9 or 10, dark hair in messy ponytail, clothes that had seen better days. But her eyes held unsettling intelligence, far too mature for her face. "You wanted to speak with me?" Marcus asked, voice carrying boardroom authority. Emma nodded, small hands clasped behind her back. Mr. Wellington, I know about the Yamamoto Group situation. The supposed data breach, threatened lawsuits, pressure from Japanese government to suspend operations. She paused. I also know it's not a real data breach. It's corporate espionage designed to look like security failure. Marcus stared at Emma, processing her audacious claim. Morning sun through his windows highlighted the absurdity. A homeless child claiming she could solve what expert teams couldn't understand. Corporate espionage, he repeated, voice mixing disbelief and desperate hope. Young lady, do you understand what's at stake? Wellington Tech employs 50,000 people worldwide. The Yamamoto contract alone is worth $3 billion. Emma nodded gravely. I know exactly what's at stake, sir. That's why I'm here. Rebecca burst through office doors, face pale with panic. Mr. Wellington, Tokyo called. The Japanese Minister of Technology is holding a press conference in 2 hours. Sources say he's announcing a complete ban on Wellington Tech operations. The stock is free-falling. Marcus felt his empire's weight pressing down. 20 years of building, innovating, dreaming, potentially gone because of one scandal. He looked at Emma, this strange child who'd appeared in his darkest hour like something from a fairy tale. You mentioned solving this, he said quietly. How? With one phone call, Emma replied, to someone who can stop the press conference and reveal what's really happening. Marcus laughed bitterly. Do you know the Japanese minister personally? Friends with the Prime Minister? Because those are the only people with that influence. Emma's expression didn't change. Before my life fell apart, I lived in Tokyo for 2 years. My mother worked for Yamamoto Group before she got sick. The revelation hit Marcus like a physical blow. This child had connections to the very company at his crisis's center. Your mother worked for Yamamoto. She was senior systems analyst. She discovered the same security vulnerabilities being exploited now. She tried reporting them, but someone buried her findings. That someone is the same person feeding information to your competitors. Marcus sank into his chair, mind racing. Who? Who is it? Emma hesitated, looking like the frightened child she really was. Mr. Wellington, if I tell you everything, if I make that call and save your company, will you promise something? What kind of promise? Promise you'll help me find out what happened to my mother. Promise whoever destroyed her career and left us with nothing will face consequences. Marcus studied her face, seeing determination mixed with deep old pain. Whatever happened to her mother had devastated this family. If you can truly solve this crisis, I'll do everything in my power to help you find truth. Emma took a deep breath. The person sabotaging your company is David Chen, your Vice President of International Operations. He's been selling information to Sakura Industries for over a year. And he's my stepfather. Marcus's blood turned to ice. David Chen was one of his most trusted executives, personally promoted 6 months ago. That's impossible. David's been with the company 8 years. He's family. He's also the reason my mother is dead, Emma said quietly. The office fell into stunned silence. This wasn't just corporate espionage. It was personal, complicated, twisted beyond any scandal his company had faced. Emma's hands shook now, but her voice remained steady. After my mother died from stress and illness caused by losing her job, David married her best friend and got custody. But when he found out I'd been listening to his calls and understood what he was doing, he decided I was too dangerous to keep around. Marcus rose from his chair, protective instincts suddenly awakening. Are you telling me David Chen abandoned a child on the streets to cover up his crimes? Emma nodded. 3 months ago. He told social services I was uncontrollable and dangerous. They believed him because he's successful and respected. No one believes homeless children, Mr. Wellington. We become invisible. The pieces fell into place with horrifying clarity. David Chen had orchestrated the perfect crime, using his position to sabotage the company while eliminating the one witness who could expose him. But he hadn't counted on Emma's intelligence or determination to survive. "Emma, if everything you're telling me is true, that phone call you mentioned, who exactly would you be calling?" Emma reached into her jacket and pulled out a battered smartphone. "My mother kept detailed records of everything she discovered at Yamamoto Group. Before she died, she entrusted those files to someone she trusted completely, someone with power to expose the truth." "Who?" "Minister Tanaka's chief of staff. My mother saved his daughter's life during a company emergency 5 years ago. He owes her a debt he's been waiting to repay." Marcus stared at this remarkable child who'd just revealed a connection that could save his entire empire. But even as hope surged, nagging worry tugged at his mind. If Emma was right about David Chen, his company had been betrayed by someone he trusted completely. "What do you need from me?" he asked. Emma looked up with eyes far too old for her face. "I need you to believe me, Mr. Wellington. And I need you ready to act on what I'm about to reveal." As she began dialing from memory, Marcus realized his entire future and 50,000 employees' futures was now in the hands of a 9-year-old homeless girl who might just be the most brilliant person he'd ever met. Emma's fingers moved across the phone screen with surprising confidence, navigating an international calling sequence with practiced ease. Marcus watched. Fascinated despite skepticism as she handled the complex process like someone who'd done this many times. "Tanaka-san's office," she said softly, switching seamlessly to fluent Japanese. Marcus's eyebrows rose. This child was full of unexpected revelations. As Emma spoke in rapid, respectful Japanese, Marcus found himself studying her more carefully. Her clothes were worn, but clean and carefully maintained. Her hair, though simple, was neat and recently washed. This wasn't a child who'd given up on herself despite living on streets. Emma's conversation continued for several minutes, her tone becoming more animated. Marcus caught fragments of English mixed with Japanese, words like evidence, Yamamoto, and Wellington Tech. Whatever she was discussing was clearly complex and detailed. Finally, Emma switched back to English. "Yes, sir, I understand completely. I'll have Mr. Wellington provide direct contact information for verification. The files are exactly as my mother described." She paused, listening. "No, sir, I'm certain about the timeline. Everything will make sense once you see documentation." Marcus felt his heart rate accelerating. This conversation sounded far too sophisticated to be a child's fantasy. Emma was discussing specific procedures, mentioning names and dates with absolute confidence. "How long do you need?" Emma asked. Another pause. 30 minutes? Perfect timing for the press conference delay. She looked up at Marcus, eyes bright with excitement or terror. "Yes, sir. Mr. Wellington is right here." She held out the phone. "He wants to speak with you directly." Marcus took the phone with trembling hands. "This is Marcus Wellington." The voice was crisp, professional, perfect English with slight Japanese accent. "Mr. Wellington, my name is Kenji Nakamura, Chief of Staff to Minister Tanaka. I believe you have a very remarkable young lady with you." Yes, it appears so." "Emma-chan has just presented information that could revolutionize our understanding of your Tokyo subsidiary situation. However, before proceeding, I need to verify certain details about your company's internal structure and recent communications." Marcus spent the next 15 minutes answering increasingly detailed questions about Wellington Tech's operations. Nakamura asked about security protocols, personnel changes, financial transfers, and communication systems with a precision that suggested he already knew many of the answers. Each question felt like a test. And Marcus found himself grateful for his thorough knowledge of his own company. Can you confirm that your Vice President of International Operations has access to Level 7 security clearances? Nakamura asked. Yes. David Chen has had that access for 18 months now. It was part of his promotion package. And these clearances would include access to subsidiary financial records, communication logs, and strategic planning documents. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. Yes, they would. Mr. Nakamura, why are you asking specifically about David's access levels? Because, Mr. Wellington, if Emma-chan's information is correct, we are dealing with one of the most sophisticated cases of corporate espionage I have encountered in 20 years of government service. Emma stepped closer to Marcus, her small face tense with concentration. She was listening to every word of the conversation, occasionally nodding as if confirming details in her own mind. Nakamura continued, Based on Emma-chan's information and your responses, I believe we have grounds to postpone this morning's press conference. However, I need one crucial piece of evidence to present to Minister Tanaka, something that will prove beyond doubt that Wellington Tech is the victim, not the perpetrator. What do you need? Access to David Chen's recent communication records, specifically his encrypted email exchanges over the past 18 months. Can you obtain these without alerting him to our investigation? Marcus felt his stomach drop. David Chen was currently in the building, 3 floors below, in his own executive office. I would need to involve our IT security department. That kind of access requires special authorization and multiple security protocols. Mr. Wellington, Nakamura's voice became more urgent, Emma-chan has informed me that Mr. Chen is planning to submit his resignation this afternoon and leave the country tonight on a flight to a non-extradition territory. If he suspects that his activities have been discovered, he will destroy all evidence and disappear permanently. You have perhaps 2 hours to act before he becomes unreachable. Marcus looked at Emma, who was watching him with intense concentration. The gravity of the situation was becoming clearer with each passing moment. Emma, how did you know about his travel plans? How could you possibly have access to that kind of information? Emma's voice was barely above a whisper. I've been following him for 3 weeks, Mr. Wellington. Every morning, every evening, every weekend. He doesn't know I'm still in Seattle. He thinks I'm somewhere in California by now, probably dead or too scared to ever come forward. But I've been watching his every move, learning his patterns, listening to his phone calls. Marcus felt a surge of admiration mixed with horror. This 9-year-old child had been conducting her own surveillance operation while living on the streets. That's incredibly dangerous, Emma. What if he had seen you? He almost did twice. But homeless children are invisible, Mr. Wellington. Adults look through us, not at us. It's the one advantage we have. The weight of her words hit Marcus like a physical blow. While he'd been building his empire in his ivory tower, this remarkable child had been surviving on the streets, gathering intelligence that could save his entire company. Marcus made a decision that would change everything. Rebecca, get me Harold Morrison from IT Security immediately. Tell him I need emergency access to David Chen's complete communication records within the next 30 minutes. This is a code red situation. Highest priority. Rebecca nodded and rushed from the office, her heels clicking rapidly down the marble corridor. Marcus turned back to the phone. Mr. Nakamura, if we can provide this evidence, what exactly are you prepared to do? If Emma-chan's information proves accurate, I am prepared to hold a joint press conference with Minister Tanaka within 3 hours. We will publicly exonerate Wellington Tech of all wrongdoing and announce the arrest of the actual perpetrators of this conspiracy. Additionally, we will immediately reinstate all contracts and partnerships that have been suspended and we will issue a formal apology to your company for the distress caused during this investigation." Marcus felt his knees go weak. This was more than he had dared to hope for, even 12 hours ago, when his world was still stable and secure. And if the evidence doesn't support these claims, then Wellington Tech will face the full consequences of its apparent negligence in protecting sensitive data. And this young lady will have to answer some very difficult questions about how she obtained classified information that should have been impossible for a civilian to access. Emma stepped closer to Marcus, her small hand reaching out to touch his arm. The gesture was so trusting, so innocent, that it broke his heart. "Mr. Wellington, I know you're scared. I know this seems impossible to believe, but everything I've told you is absolutely true. David Chen destroyed my family, and now he's trying to destroy your company. Please trust me." Marcus looked down into Emma's eyes and saw something that took his breath away, a fierce intelligence combined with desperate hope, but also a deep sadness that no child should ever have to carry. Whatever had happened to this girl, she had survived things that would have broken most adults. "Mr. Nakamura will get you the evidence you need," Marcus said into the phone. "Emma, are you absolutely certain about everything you've told me?" Emma nodded solemnly. "Mr. Wellington, in about 45 minutes, you're going to see proof that will shock you to your core. But I need you to promise me something." "What?" "When this is over, when David Chen is exposed and your company is safe, I need your help finding answers to questions that have haunted me my entire life." Marcus felt an odd chill run down his spine. "What kind of questions?" Emma's voice became very small and vulnerable. "Questions about my real father, Mr. Wellington. Questions about why he left my mother and me 9 years ago, and whether he ever really loved us at all." Harold Morrison, head of IT security, burst through the office doors carrying a laptop and wearing an expression of barely contained shock. Behind him trailed 2 junior technicians, both looking pale and shaken. "Mr. Wellington, you need to see this immediately. The David Chen files. Sir, this is much worse than corporate espionage." Emma stepped back against the floor-to-ceiling windows as the office filled with people, but Marcus noticed she kept her eyes fixed on his face, as if she were studying his reaction to every new piece of information being revealed. "Harold, what did you find?" Marcus managed to ask, forcing himself to focus on the immediate crisis, while his mind reeled from Emma's earlier hints about her father. "Sir, Chen hasn't just been selling information to Sakura Industries. He's been systematically destroying evidence of his own embezzlement for over 2 years. The Tokyo subsidiary crisis was designed specifically to cover up the fact that he's stolen over $50 million from various international accounts." Harold's fingers flew across his laptop keyboard, pulling up screen after screen of damning evidence. Marcus felt his legs give out, and he sank heavily into his leather chair. The scandal was exponentially worse than he'd imagined. $50 million. "But here's the strangest part, sir," Harold continued, glancing nervously at Emma. "The young lady was right about everything. Every single detail she mentioned checks out perfectly. The security vulnerabilities, the timing of the attacks, the specific companies involved, even the method of data extraction. How did she know about security protocols and financial transfers that required executive-level clearance?" Emma spoke up quietly, her voice carrying a maturity that seemed impossible for someone her age. "I told you, Mr. Morrison, I've been watching and listening for months, but also—" She hesitated, then seemed to make a crucial decision. "My mother left me more than just information about the Yamamoto Group. She left me her entire digital archive, everything she discovered during her investigation." Marcus stared at her in amazement. "What kind of archive?" Boom. Hidden files, encrypted communications, financial records, security footage from the Tokyo office, personnel files, meeting transcripts. My mother was very thorough, Mr. Wellington. She knew someone was going to try to destroy her work and ruin her reputation, so she made sure there would be evidence that could survive, even if she didn't. The implications of Emma's words hit Marcus like a thunderbolt. This child had been carrying around evidence that could save his company for months while living on the streets and surviving entirely on her own. Rebecca rushed in again, her face flushed with panic and her breath coming in short gasps. "Sir, David Chen is in the elevator right now. Building security says he's coming up unscheduled, and he looks extremely agitated. He'll be here in less than 60 seconds. Emma immediately moved toward Marcus's massive mahogany desk with surprising speed and purpose. Her small hands moving quickly across his computer keyboard with practiced efficiency. "Mr. Wellington, I need you to log into your secure server immediately. Right now. Emma, I can't just give you access to—" "Please!" Her voice carried a desperation that cut through his confusion like a knife. "David absolutely cannot know I'm here. If he sees me, if he realizes I'm still alive and still in Seattle, he'll run immediately, and we'll lose our only chance to stop him before he disappears forever. But more than that." Her voice dropped to a frightened whisper. "I think he might try to hurt me again, permanently this time." Marcus felt a surge of protective anger that surprised him with its intensity and immediacy. "Again? Emma? What do you mean by again?" "The night he abandoned me at the social services office, he said I was too smart for my own good. He said if I ever tried to tell anyone what I knew about his business dealings, no one would believe me because I was just a homeless child, and I would disappear permanently without anyone ever knowing what happened to me." The elevator dinged ominously in the distance, and Emma moved with surprising speed and agility to hide behind Marcus's massive desk. "Please," she whispered urgently, "let me show you the evidence while he's here. Let him confess without knowing I'm listening. Give him enough rope to hang himself." Marcus made a split-second decision that would change the course of everything that followed. He nodded grimly to Harold and Rebecca, signaling them to play along with whatever was about to unfold, then quickly logged into his computer system with his executive access codes. Emma's fingers flew across the keyboard with the practiced efficiency of someone far older and more experienced, pulling up files that Marcus didn't even know existed on his own supposedly secure server. Financial records, communication logs, travel receipts, meeting schedules, all of it painting a picture of systematic betrayal that went back years. The office doors opened with deliberate authority, and David Chen strode in with his characteristic confidence and commanding presence. At 45, David was handsome in a cold, calculating way, with sharp, angular features and expensive suits that never seemed to wrinkle even after the longest days. Marcus had always admired David's precision, attention to detail, and unflappable composure, qualities that now seemed sinister and calculating in this completely different context. "Marcus, we need to talk immediately," David said, his voice tight with barely controlled urgency. "The Tokyo situation is spiraling completely out of control. The Japanese government is preparing to seize all our assets, and our legal team says we have no viable defense. I think we need to seriously consider cutting our losses entirely and liquidating the whole Japanese operation before the government can take everything." Marcus forced his voice to remain steady and neutral, even as his heart pounded with adrenaline. "That seems like a rather extreme response, David. Perhaps we should wait for more information before making such drastic decisions." "There is no more information to wait for," David snapped, his usually perfect composure cracking slightly. "I've been working on this crisis for months, coordinating with our legal teams, our public relations firms, our government liaisons. I'm telling you, as someone who understands the situation better than anyone else, that our only viable option is complete withdrawal from the Japanese market before this scandal destroys the entire company. From her hiding place behind the massive desk, Emma was typing silently on Marcus's computer, bringing up file after file of damaging evidence. Marcus could see the screen from his position, and what he saw made his blood run cold. Bank transfers to personal accounts, encrypted communications with competitors, meeting schedules that corresponded perfectly with every major security breach, travel records that showed David had been in Tokyo during every suspicious incident. "David," Marcus said carefully, choosing his words with extreme precision, "help me understand something. How long have you been personally aware of the specific security vulnerabilities in our Tokyo systems?" David's eyes narrowed dangerously, and Marcus could see the calculating mind behind them working furiously to assess this unexpected line of questioning. "What kind of question is that, Marcus? That's an odd thing to focus on right now." "I've been working tirelessly to address the security issues since they first came to light 6 months ago, when our Tokyo office reported the initial anomalies." Emma's fingers moved across the keyboard with silent precision, pulling up a communication dated 18 months earlier, a detailed technical report from someone identified as M. Chen that outlined the exact security vulnerabilities that were now being systematically exploited. The report was comprehensive, technical, and showed an intimate knowledge of the system architecture that would have taken months to acquire. "That's very interesting, David," Marcus continued, his voice remaining carefully neutral while his mind processed the implications of what he was seeing on the screen. "Because I'm looking at evidence that suggests these specific vulnerabilities were identified and documented much earlier than 6 months ago. In fact, it appears that someone in our company has known about these exact security flaws for well over a year." David's face went pale, and Marcus could see sweat beginning to form on his forehead, despite the perfectly controlled temperature in the executive office. "Marcus, I don't understand what you're implying. Are you questioning my competence? My dedication to this company?" "I'm not implying anything, David. I'm asking direct, specific questions about communications and reports that seem to suggest our current crisis might not be entirely the result of external attacks on our systems." Emma pulled up another file. This one was an audio recording of a phone conversation between David and someone speaking in rapid Japanese. Even without translation, the tone was clearly conspiratorial, and Marcus could make out English words scattered throughout: Wellington Tech, transfer complete, timeline accelerated, and most damning of all, Marcus suspects nothing. David stepped closer to Marcus's desk, and Emma froze in her hiding place behind the massive piece of furniture, holding her breath and trying to make herself as small as possible. The tension in the room was palpable, and Marcus could feel his heart pounding as the confrontation escalated. "Marcus, I don't know what you think you've discovered, but I can assure you that—" The computer speakers crackled to life with the sound of David's own voice, clear and unmistakable. "The Wellington Tech data will be transferred according to our agreement with Sakura Industries. Marcus suspects nothing, and his blind trust in me makes this almost too easy. The company will be completely vulnerable and ready for acquisition within 6 months, exactly as we discussed." The room fell into absolute, deafening silence. David's face cycled through several distinct emotions in rapid succession: shock at hearing his own voice, panic as he realized the implications, desperate calculation as he searched for an escape route, and finally, cold resignation as he understood that his carefully constructed deception had completely unraveled. "You bastard," Marcus whispered, rising from his chair with barely controlled fury. "You've been planning the destruction of my company for over a year. Everything, the security breaches, the Tokyo crisis, the international scandal, all of it was orchestrated by you." David's hand moved instinctively toward his jacket pocket, and Marcus realized with growing alarm that David might be armed and desperate enough to do something violent. But before anyone could react or move, Emma stood up from behind the desk, her small figure somehow commanding attention in the suddenly dangerous atmosphere of the room. "Hello, David," she said quietly, her voice steady despite the obvious fear in her eyes. "I told you I was too smart for my own good, didn't I?" David Chen went white as a sheet, staring at Emma as if she were a ghost returned from the grave to haunt him. His mouth opened and closed several times without any sound emerging, and his hands began to shake visibly. That's impossible," he finally managed to stammer. "You're supposed to be. You can't be here. This isn't possible." "Dead?" Emma finished calmly. "Yes, I'm sure that would have been much more convenient for you. No witnesses, no loose ends, no one who knew about your secret meetings and your phone calls to Tokyo." Marcus looked between Emma and David, studying their faces and body language, trying to understand the complex relationship between them. There was obviously a family resemblance, similar bone structure, similar dark hair, similar intelligent eyes. But there was something else, something that didn't quite fit with what he had initially assumed. "She's your daughter," Marcus said, the pieces clicking into place in his mind. "Emma isn't your stepdaughter from a previous marriage. She's your biological daughter, and you abandoned your own child to cover up your crimes." Emma shook her head sadly, and Marcus was struck by the profound sadness in her expression, a sadness that seemed far too deep and complex for someone so young. "No, Mr. Wellington. David Chen was married to my mother for several years, and he was the only father figure I knew for most of my childhood. But he's not my real father. He's not my biological father." Marcus felt a strange chill run down his spine as Emma's words sank in. If David wasn't her father, then who was? And why did this revelation seem to carry such enormous weight and significance? Emma looked directly at Marcus, her eyes filled with a mixture of hope, terror, and desperate longing. "My real father is someone else entirely, Mr. Wellington. Someone my mother never stopped loving, even after he disappeared from our lives. Someone she always believed was a good man, who had made a terrible mistake when he was young and scared." The words hung in the air like a physical presence, and Marcus found himself staring into Emma's eyes, really looking at them for the first time. The unusual green color, the same intensity and intelligence that he saw in his own mirror every morning, the same stubborn determination that had driven him to build his empire. "She said," Emma continued, her voice barely audible now, "that my real father was named Marcus Wellington, and that someday, when I was old enough to understand forgiveness and second chances, she would help me find him and give him the opportunity to be the father he never had the chance to be." The revelation hit Marcus like a physical blow, and he felt the world tilt and shift around him as 9 years of buried guilt and regret came crashing down on his shoulders. This remarkable, brilliant, courageous child standing before him wasn't just the person who had saved his company. She was his daughter, the daughter he had never known existed, the daughter he had abandoned before she was even born. Marcus felt the world collapse around him as Emma's words echoed in his mind. Michelle. Beautiful, brilliant Michelle Chen, who had worked as a systems analyst while finishing her graduate degree. The woman he had loved with desperate intensity that terrified his 28-year-old self. The woman who had told him she was pregnant just as Wellington Tech was securing its first major investor. The moment when he'd had to choose between the family they could build together and the empire he dreamed of creating. He had chosen wrong, catastrophically, irrevocably wrong. "Emma," he whispered. His voice breaking on her name like glass against stone. "You're my daughter." Emma nodded, tears streaming down her face now, leaving clean tracks through the grime of weeks spent living on the streets. Mama showed me pictures of you from when you were young. She kept them hidden in a box under her bed. She said you looked different now, older, more serious, more successful, but that you still had the same eyes, the same green eyes that I see in the mirror every morning." David Chen stood frozen by the office door, his face a mask of confusion and growing panic as he processed this unexpected revelation. "This is impossible," he muttered, shaking his head. "Michelle never mentioned. She always said Emma's father was completely out of the picture. She said he was gone forever. Gone because that's what it felt like to her," Emma said, her voice steady despite the tears. "You left before I was born, Mr. Wellington. Mama married David 2 years later because she needed help raising me, and because she thought she could never find love like that again. But she never stopped hoping that someday you would come back." Marcus moved around his desk toward Emma, his steps hesitant and uncertain, as if he were approaching something precious that might shatter at the slightest wrong movement. This child, his child, had been living on the streets, surviving by her wits and intelligence, while he sat in his ivory tower, completely oblivious to her existence. The magnitude of his failure as a human being crashed over him like a physical blow. "Why didn't she ever tell me?" he asked, his voice barely audible above the hum of the building's ventilation system. "Why didn't she let me know you existed? I would have. I would have done anything to help. I would have changed everything." Emma wiped her nose with the back of her hand, a gesture so childlike and innocent that it shattered what remained of Marcus's composure. "She tried, Mr. Wellington. She tried for years. She sent letters to your company, emails to your personal accounts. She even tried calling your office dozens of times. But you were already famous by then, already successful and important. And successful people have barriers to keep regular people away." Marcus remembered those years with painful clarity now, the relentless focus on growth and expansion, the paranoia about competitors and industrial espionage, the elaborate security systems he'd created to protect his privacy. He'd been so afraid of distractions, so obsessed with maintaining his focus that he'd created a fortress designed to keep his past from ever finding him. "She never stopped believing you were fundamentally a good person," Emma continued, her voice growing stronger with each word. "Even when David convinced her that you had abandoned us on purpose, even when he showed her newspaper articles about your success and asked her why a man that wealthy and powerful would ignore his own child, she insisted that you must have had reasons she didn't understand. She said someday, when I was older and ready to understand about forgiveness and second chances, she would help me write you a letter that you couldn't ignore." Rebecca and Harold stood like statues near the office entrance, witnesses to a revelation that seemed too dramatic and emotionally devastating to be real. But David Chen was becoming increasingly agitated, his eyes darting between Emma and the door, as if calculating his chances of escape before the full weight of his crimes came crashing down on him. "This is all very touching and dramatic," David said, his voice dripping with sarcasm and barely controlled desperation, "but it doesn't change the immediate situation. The Tokyo crisis still needs to be resolved, and all this emotional family reunion drama isn't going to save your company from complete destruction, Marcus." Emma turned to face David, and Marcus saw a flash of steel in her expression that reminded him painfully and powerfully of himself at that age. The same determination, the same refusal to be intimidated by adults who underestimated her intelligence. "Actually, David, it changes absolutely everything," Emma said, her voice carrying an authority that seemed impossible from someone so young. "Because now Mr. Wellington, my father, knows the complete truth about what you did to our family and what you've been doing to his company." David's mask of composure finally cracked completely, revealing the desperate, cornered criminal beneath the polished executive facade. "What I did? What I did?" His voice rose dangerously, and Marcus tensed, ready to protect Emma if David became violent. "I saved you and your mother. I gave you both everything. A beautiful home, financial security, social status, respectability. Michelle was nothing before I married her. Just a single mother with a bastard child whose father didn't even want her." The words hit Marcus like physical blows, each one designed to inflict maximum emotional damage. But Emma stepped forward, her small frame radiating a courage that amazed and terrified him. "My father didn't know about me because you made sure of that," Emma said firmly, her voice cutting through David's protests like a blade. "You made sure he never knew I existed because you needed Mama isolated and dependent on you. You intercepted her letters, blocked her emails, had your assistant screen phone calls to make sure she never reached him. You destroyed every attempt she made to contact him." Marcus stared at David with newfound horror and rage. The betrayal went even deeper than corporate espionage. David had deliberately prevented him from knowing about Emma's existence. "You kept me from my own daughter." "For 9 years. Of course I did," David shouted, his carefully maintained facade finally collapsing entirely. "You think I wanted Michelle pining after some fantasy reunion with her first love. You think I wanted to raise another man's child while she spent every day dreaming about what might have been if you hadn't abandoned her?" The confession hung in the air like poison. David Chen hadn't just stolen from Wellington Tech and destroyed the Yamamoto Group evidence. He had stolen 9 years of Marcus's relationship with his daughter, 9 years of Emma's life with her real father, and 9 years of Michelle's hope for reconciliation and closure. Emma pulled out her phone with steady hands, and Marcus realized she had been recording everything from the moment David entered the office. "David, you just confessed to mail fraud, interference with official communications, corporate espionage, embezzlement, child endangerment, and conspiracy. That recording is being uploaded to a secure server as we speak, with copies being sent to the FBI, the Japanese authorities, and the SEC. David's face went from pale to ashen as he understood the implications. His entire carefully constructed house of cards was collapsing, and there was no escape route left. But instead of surrendering, instead of accepting defeat, his expression hardened into something dangerous and desperate. "You clever little bitch," he snarled, lunging toward Emma with his hands extended like claws. "I should have made sure you were dead instead of just abandoned. I should have finished what I started." But Marcus moved faster than he'd ever moved in his life, his paternal instincts overriding years of sedentary executive lifestyle. He intercepted David's charge and grabbed him by the throat, lifting him partially off the ground with strength born of pure fury and desperation. "Don't you dare touch her," Marcus growled, his voice carrying a menace that surprised even him. "Don't you dare lay a finger on my daughter, you bastard." Harold Morrison had already called building security, and within moments, armed guards were flooding into the office. David struggled briefly in Marcus's grip, then went limp as the full reality of his situation finally penetrated his desperation. "Mr. Wellington," Harold said breathlessly, "the FBI is on their way. Agent Sarah Mitchell from the White Collar Crime Division has been tracking suspicious international transfers for months. Apparently, Emma's information has given them everything they need for a federal indictment." Emma moved closer to Marcus, her small hand slipping into his much larger one. The gesture was so trusting, so natural, that it took his breath away. After everything she'd been through, abandonment, betrayal, months of living on the streets, she was still willing to trust him. "Daddy?" she said quietly, testing the word for the first time. "Is it okay if I call you that?" Marcus felt his knees go weak, and he had to brace himself against his desk to keep from collapsing. Emma, sweetheart, you can call me anything you want. I'm just sorry it took me 9 years to find you. I'm sorry I wasn't there when you needed me most. David was led away in handcuffs, still ranting about ungrateful children and betrayal, but Marcus barely noticed. His entire world had narrowed to this remarkable child who had not only saved his company, but had given him something infinitely more valuable, a second chance at being the father he'd never had the opportunity to become. "What happens now?" Emma asked, her voice small and uncertain for the first time since she'd entered his office. Marcus knelt down to her eye level, his hands gently touching her shoulders. "Now, Emma, we figure out how to be a family. We have a lot of lost time to make up for, and I want to hear everything. About your mother, about your life, about your incredible intelligence and courage. But first, we need to get you somewhere safe and comfortable. No more sleeping in parking garages, no more being invisible." 3 hours later, Marcus's penthouse apartment had been transformed. What had once been a sterile showcase of expensive furniture and corporate awards was now buzzing with activity as his housekeeper, Mrs. Patterson, directed a team of workers in setting up a proper bedroom for Emma. The child psychologist he'd hired on emergency consultation was on her way, along with a pediatric physician and a trauma counselor specializing in children who had experienced homelessness. Emma sat on Marcus's enormous leather couch, looking impossibly small against the expanse of black Italian leather. Wearing new clothes that his assistant had purchased during a frantic shopping trip, the transformation was remarkable. Cleaned up and properly dressed, she looked exactly like what she was, an intelligent, beautiful 9-year-old girl who belonged in a loving home, not sleeping in parking garages and surviving on her wits. But Marcus could see the wariness in her eyes, the careful way she held herself, as if she were prepared to run at the first sign that this miraculous change in her circumstances might be temporary. "Emma," he said gently, settling into the chair across from her, "I know this is all overwhelming. I know you've learned to be suspicious of adults and their promises, but I want you to understand something very important. You're safe now. You're home. And nothing David Chen or anyone else ever did is going to separate us again." Emma nodded, but her expression remained guarded. "Mr. Wellington, Daddy, can I ask you something that might make you angry?" Marcus felt his heart clench at her careful phrasing. "Emma, you can ask me anything, and I promise I won't get angry. We're family now, and family means you never have to be afraid to tell me what you're thinking. Why didn't you try harder to find Mama when she was pregnant? She said you loved each other, but then you just disappeared. David always said it was because you didn't want the responsibility, but Mama said there had to be more to the story." Marcus took a deep breath, knowing that his answer to this question would set the foundation for their entire future relationship. Emma deserved the truth, even if it made him look weak and selfish. "Your mother was right. There was more to the story, but that doesn't make my choices any less terrible." He leaned forward, meeting Emma's eyes directly. 9 years ago, I was 28 years old and absolutely obsessed with building Wellington Tech into something important. I was working 18-hour days, sleeping in my office, convinced that if I lost focus for even a moment, everything I'd worked for would collapse. Emma listened intently, her intelligent eyes processing every word. "When your mother told me she was pregnant, I panicked. Not because I didn't love her, I loved her more than I'd ever loved anyone, but because I was terrified that I couldn't be both the father you deserved and the CEO I thought I needed to be. I thought I had to choose between my family and my company." "So you chose the company," Emma said quietly, without judgment but with a sadness that cut Marcus to his core. "I chose the company because I was young and stupid and scared. I thought I could build something successful first, then come back and be worthy of your mother's love and your respect. I didn't understand that by the time I was successful enough to feel worthy, it would be too late to matter. Emma was quiet for a long moment, processing his explanation. Mama always said that people make mistakes when they're scared, and that the measure of a person isn't whether they make mistakes, but whether they try to fix them when they get the chance. Marcus felt tears forming in his eyes. Your mother was an incredibly wise woman. I just wish I'd been smart enough to realize that 9 years ago. She also said, Emma continued, that you were probably building something important, and that maybe someday your work would help a lot of people. She said that even if you never came back to us, at least you were probably making the world better in your own way. The generosity of Michelle's perspective, even after he'd abandoned her, was almost too much for Marcus to bear. Emma, I want you to know that I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to make up for the time we lost. I'm going to be the father I should have been from the beginning. Emma smiled for the first time since entering his apartment. A shy, hesitant smile that transformed her entire face. Does this mean I don't have to live in the parking garage anymore? Marcus laughed, despite the tears running down his face. Emma, you're never going to live anywhere but in a real home with people who love you. In fact, I have something to tell you that I think will make you happy. What? I've been talking with my lawyers this afternoon. I want to formally adopt you, make everything legal and official, but more than that, I want to introduce you to someone very special, my wife Sarah. She's been in London on business, but she's flying back tonight because she can't wait to meet you. Emma's eyes widened. You're married. I'm going to have a stepmother. You're going to have a mother who's going to love you just as much as I do, Marcus said. Sarah and I have been trying to have children for years, but it never happened. She's going to be over the moon when she meets you. For the first time, Emma's careful composure cracked, and she launched herself off the couch and into Marcus's arms. He held her tightly, feeling the small, fragile weight of his daughter in his arms for the first time, and wondering how he'd ever lived without knowing this kind of love existed. That evening, Sarah Wellington arrived at the penthouse like a whirlwind of energy and emotion. Marcus had called her in London with the bare outline of the story, but seeing Emma in person, this brilliant, beautiful child who had been living on the streets while they enjoyed their comfortable life, left her speechless with a mixture of joy and heartbreak. "Oh, sweetheart," Sarah whispered, kneeling down to Emma's eye level in the entrance hallway. "I'm so sorry for everything you've been through, but you're safe now and you're home. And we're going to make sure you never have to be scared or alone again." Emma studied Sarah with the careful attention of a child who had learned to read adults quickly and accurately. Sarah was younger than Marcus, maybe 35, with warm brown eyes and the kind of gentle smile that seemed genuine rather than forced. She was wearing an expensive business suit, but she'd obviously rushed straight from the airport without bothering to change or freshen up. "Are you really happy that I'm here?" Emma asked with characteristic directness. Some people might not want their husband to suddenly have a daughter they never knew about. Sarah's eyes filled with tears, and she reached out to gently touch Emma's face. "Emma, honey, Marcus and I have wanted a child for so long. The fact that you're here, that you're brilliant and brave and amazing, feels like a miracle. I just wish we'd found you sooner." Over dinner, the first real meal Emma had eaten at a dining table in months, the three of them began the delicate process of becoming a family. Emma told them about her mother, about the months after Michelle's death, when David had gradually become more controlling and frightening, about the night he'd finally abandoned her with nothing but the clothes on her back and her mother's hidden digital files. "The hardest part wasn't the cold or the hunger," Emma said, picking at her pasta. "The hardest part was feeling like I'd disappeared, like I didn't exist anymore. Adults would look right through me, like I was invisible." DeMarcus felt rage building in his chest again at the thought of his daughter experiencing such dehumanization. "Emma, I promise you that you will never be invisible again. You're the most important person in our world now." Sarah reached across the table to take Emma's hand. "Emma, can you tell us about your mother? What was she like? I want to understand the woman who raised such an incredible daughter." Emma's face lit up with love and pride. "Mama was really smart. She spoke 4 languages and could fix computers and solve math problems that made my teachers' heads hurt. But she was also really sad sometimes, especially on your birthday, Daddy. She would sit by the window and look at old pictures, and I could tell she was thinking about what might have been different." The revelation that Michelle had remembered his birthday every year, had mourned their lost relationship annually, was almost too painful for Marcus to process. "She used to tell me stories about you when you were young," Emma continued, "about how you would stay up all night working on computer programs, how you had this crazy dream of building a company that would change the world. She said you were the most passionate, determined person she'd ever met, but also the kindest." Sarah squeezed Marcus's hand under the table, offering silent support as he struggled with the weight of Michelle's continued faith in him, despite his abandonment. "Emma," Sarah said gently, "what would you like your life to look like now? What would make you happy?" Emma thought for a moment, her expression serious. "I want to go to a real school with other kids my age. I want to learn things I've never had the chance to learn. I want to help Daddy with his company. I have lots of ideas about how to make the security systems better. And—" she hesitated, looking between them uncertainly. "And what, sweetheart?" Marcus prompted. "I want to visit Mama's grave and tell her that everything worked out okay. That you found me, and that you're exactly the kind of person she always said you were. I think she would be happy to know that we're together." Marcus had to excuse himself from the table to compose himself in the kitchen. The thought of visiting Michelle's grave, of having to confront the woman he'd loved and abandoned, was overwhelming. But Emma was right. Michelle deserved to know that her daughter was safe and loved. When he returned to the dining room, he found Sarah and Emma looking at photo albums on Sarah's phone, pictures of Marcus and Sarah's life together, their travels, their home, the family they'd always wanted to create. "Emma," he said, his voice steady now, "tomorrow we'll visit your mother, all 3 of us together, and then we'll start planning your future. School enrollment, legal paperwork, maybe even some changes to the company so you can be involved in making those security improvements you mentioned." Emma looked up at him with eyes that were no longer guarded but filled with hope and trust. "Daddy, do you think Mama can see us now? Do you think she knows that everything turned out okay?" Marcus sat down beside his daughter and pulled her into a hug that felt like coming home after 9 years in exile. "I think she knows, Emma. I think she's been watching over you this whole time, making sure you stayed strong and smart and brave until you could find your way back to where you belonged." 3 weeks later, the transformation in all their lives was remarkable. Emma had not only enrolled in the prestigious Seattle Academy, but had tested so far above grade level that she was taking advanced mathematics and computer science courses, typically reserved for high school students. Her teachers were amazed by her intellectual capabilities, but also concerned about her social integration. She was still learning how to interact with children who had never faced the kind of survival challenges that had shaped her worldview. Marcus had made significant changes to his role at Wellington Tech as well. While still maintaining his position as CEO, he'd restructured his schedule to allow him to be present for Emma's school events, homework sessions, and the dozens of small moments that make up a child's daily life. For the first time in his adult life, he understood that success wasn't measured solely in corporate achievements, but in the strength of the relationships that gave those achievements meaning. Sarah had thrown herself into motherhood with the same passion she'd once reserved for her legal career. She'd taken a leave of absence from her law firm to focus on helping Emma adjust to her new life, and the bond between them had grown stronger each day. Emma had never experienced the kind of patient, nurturing attention that Sarah provided, and she was blossoming under the care of a woman who truly wanted to be her mother. But the most significant change was in Emma herself. The wariness and hypervigilance that had kept her alive on the streets were gradually being replaced by the natural curiosity and playfulness of a child who felt safe and loved. She laughed more often, asked questions about everything, and had developed an insatiable appetite for learning that amazed everyone around her. On this particular Saturday morning, the three of them were having breakfast on the terrace of Marcus's penthouse when Emma made an announcement that would change their lives once again. "Daddy, Sarah, I've been thinking about something important, and I want to talk to you about it," Emma said, her tone serious in the way that always meant she'd been processing complex thoughts. "What's on your mind, sweetheart?" Sarah asked, setting down her coffee cup to give Emma her full attention. "I've been thinking about all the other kids like me, the ones who are still invisible, still living in places like parking garages and abandoned buildings, still trying to survive on their own because the adults who were supposed to protect them failed." Marcus felt his heart clench as he realized where this conversation was heading. Emma's natural empathy and intelligence were leading her toward a conclusion that would challenge them all. "I want to use some of the money you promised me, the $2 million from solving the Tokyo crisis, to create something that could help them. A foundation or a program that finds invisible children and gives them what I got: safety, education, and families who want them." Marcus and Sarah exchanged a look of profound pride and amazement. Their 9-year-old daughter was proposing to dedicate her windfall to helping other children in need. "Emma, that's an incredibly generous and mature idea," Sarah said carefully, "but that money is yours. You earned it by saving Daddy's company. You don't have to use it to help other people." Emma shook her head firmly. "I don't need $2 million, Sarah. I need a family and a home and a chance to learn and grow, and I already have all of that. But there are kids out there right now who are sleeping where I used to sleep, eating what I used to eat, feeling invisible like I used to feel. If I can help them the way Daddy helped me, then that money becomes something really important instead of just numbers in a bank account." Marcus felt tears forming in his eyes as he listened to his daughter's passionate plea. The child who had been abandoned and forgotten had developed a compassion and social consciousness that put most adults to shame. "What exactly are you thinking, Emma?" he asked gently. "What kind of foundation or program?" Emma's eyes lit up with excitement as she began outlining her vision. "I want to create a network of safe houses specifically for children who've aged out of the foster system or fallen through the cracks somehow. But more than just shelter, I want places where they can get education, job training, psychological support, and help finding real families who want them." Sarah leaned forward, her lawyer's mind already working through the logistics. "That's an enormous undertaking, Emma. It would require incredible coordination, government partnerships, trained staff, ongoing funding." "I know it's big," Emma said, "but big problems require big solutions. And I think I know how to make it work because I understand what those kids really need. Not just charity, but dignity and hope and proof that someone believes in their potential." Marcus stood up from the breakfast table and began pacing, his mind racing through possibilities. "Emma, what you're describing isn't just a foundation. It's a complete reimagining of how society addresses child homelessness and abandonment. It could change thousands of lives." "Exactly," Emma said simply. "And I want to start right here in Seattle. Prove it works. then expand to other cities. I want to make sure no child ever has to feel invisible again." Sarah reached across the table to take Emma's hands in hers. "Sweetheart, if this is really what you want to do, your father and I will support you completely. But I want you to understand that this will be incredibly hard work, and it might take years to see real results." Emma smiled with the confidence of a child who had already survived the impossible. "Sarah, 3 months ago, I was sleeping in a parking garage and eating out of garbage cans. Now I'm sitting in a penthouse planning how to change the world. I think I can handle a little hard work." Marcus stopped pacing and looked at his daughter, really looked at her, and saw not just the brilliant child he'd fallen in love with, but a future leader who would accomplish things he'd never dreamed possible. "Then let's do it," he said firmly. "All 3 of us together, the Emma Wellington Foundation for Invisible Children. We'll use your $2 million as seed money, but I'll match it with company funds, and we'll build something that will make your mother proud." Emma launched herself into his arms with a squeal of delight, and Marcus realized that in finding his daughter, he'd found not just a family, but a purpose that went far beyond corporate success. Together, they were going to change the world. 1 year later, Marcus stood at the podium of the Seattle Convention Center, looking out at an audience of over 2,000 people who had come to attend the first annual gala for the Emma Wellington Foundation for Invisible Children. In the front row sat Emma, now 10 years old and glowing with health and happiness, flanked by Sarah and by the dozens of children who had been helped by the Foundation's programs in its first year of operation. The transformation in Emma over the past year had been remarkable. She was no longer the wary, hypervigilant child who had appeared in his elevator that fateful morning. She had grown taller, filled out from proper nutrition, and developed the natural confidence of a child who knew she was loved and valued. But more than that, she had become a force for change that inspired everyone around her. "Ladies and gentlemen," Marcus began, his voice carrying easily through the packed auditorium. "A year ago, my company was facing destruction. I was a successful but fundamentally incomplete man, and my daughter was living on the streets, invisible to a world that had failed her. Tonight, we celebrate not just the success of our foundation, but the power of second chances and the incredible things that happen when we choose to see the invisible." The audience applauded warmly, but Marcus's eyes remained fixed on Emma, who was beaming with pride and excitement. The Emma Wellington Foundation has, in its first year, established 12 safe houses across 3 states, provided education and job training to over 300 young people, and facilitated 87 successful family placements. But those numbers, impressive as they are, don't tell the real story. Marcus clicked a remote, and the large screens around the auditorium filled with photographs and video testimonials from children whose lives had been transformed by the Foundation's work. The real story is in faces like these, children who were forgotten by society, but who had the intelligence, creativity, and resilience to contribute incredible things once someone believed in their potential. Children like Marcus Rodriguez, who was living in an abandoned warehouse but is now a freshman at MIT studying computer engineering. Like Sarah Kim, who was aging out of foster care but is now running her own small business while finishing high school. Like Tommy Williams, who spent 2 years living under bridges but is now reunited with an aunt who never knew he existed and is thriving in a stable, loving home. The audience was completely silent, hanging on every word as Marcus continued. "But tonight, I want to tell you about the most important transformation of all, my own. A year ago, I thought success meant corporate achievements and personal wealth. I thought I had built something important, but I was wrong. I had built an empire on a foundation of loneliness and regret, and it was as fragile as sand. Marcus's voice grew stronger, more passionate as he approached the heart of his message. My daughter Emma didn't just save my company that day she appeared in my elevator. She saved my life. She showed me what true success looks like. It looks like courage in the face of impossible odds, wisdom beyond one's years, compassion for others who are suffering, and the determination to make the world better for everyone, not just ourselves. Emma was crying now, but they were tears of joy and pride, and Sarah had her arm around her shoulders, holding her close. "Emma, would you please join me up here?" Marcus asked. Emma walked to the podium with the poise of someone far older than her 10 years, and Marcus lifted her up so she could reach the microphone. "I want to tell you all something," Emma said, her clear voice carrying through the hushed auditorium. "A year ago, I was invisible. I was hungry and cold and scared, and I thought no one would ever see me or care about me. But my daddy found me, and Sarah chose to love me. And they taught me something very important. We're only invisible if we choose to look away from each other." The audience erupted in sustained applause, but Emma held up her small hand for silence. "Every child we help through our foundation is someone's son or daughter, someone's brother or sister, someone who has dreams and ideas and talents that the world needs. When we choose to see them, when we choose to believe in them, we don't just change their lives, we change our own lives too." Marcus felt overwhelming pride as he listened to his daughter speak with the wisdom and compassion of a natural leader. "My mama always told me that the best way to honor the love someone gave you is to pass that love on to others who need it. So that's what we're doing with this foundation. We're passing on the love that saved me to other children who need saving. And we're going to keep doing it until every invisible child in the world knows that someone sees them, someone believes in them, and someone loves them." The standing ovation that followed lasted for nearly 5 minutes, and Marcus held Emma close as the audience celebrated not just their work, but the power of human connection and second chances. Later that evening, back at home in the penthouse that had become a warm, loving family space rather than a sterile corporate showcase, the three of them sat together on the couch, exhausted but deeply satisfied. "Emma," Sarah said, stroking her daughter's hair, "I am so proud of the woman you're becoming. Your mother would be amazed by everything you've accomplished." Emma curled up between her parents, feeling safe and loved and exactly where she belonged. "Do you think we really can help every invisible child? Do you think we can actually change the world?" Marcus looked at his remarkable daughter and felt a certainty he'd never experienced in all his years of corporate success. "Emma, a year ago, you changed everything by refusing to stay invisible. You saved a company, brought a family together, and showed us all what courage looks like. If you can do all that in one day, I think changing the world is definitely within reach." Emma smiled sleepily, already dreaming of all the children they would help and all the families they would create. She had gone from invisible to invaluable, from forgotten to beloved, from surviving to thriving. And in the process, she had transformed not just her own life, but the lives of everyone around her. As Marcus tucked his daughter into bed in her beautiful room, filled with books and toys and evidence of being cherished, he whispered the words he'd waited 10 years to say. "Good night, Emma. Daddy loves you more than all the stars in the sky." "I love you too, Daddy," Emma whispered back. "Thank you for seeing me when I was invisible." And Marcus knew that no corporate achievement, no matter how impressive, would ever compare to the simple miracle of being Emma's father and Sarah's husband, of having a family built on love, forgiveness, and the unshakable belief that everyone deserves to be seen, valued, and loved. The invisible child had become the most important person in his world, and in saving her, she had saved them all.